The power of imagination can take fantasy and create the unimaginable. Engineers and scientists do it all the time. Now, UC San Diego is undertaking an ambitious effort to study imagination with the opening of the Arthur C. Clarke Center for Human Imagination. Named after renowned author Arthur Clarke, who wrote almost 100 books, including 2001, A Space Odyssey. Joining me is Seth Lehrer, Dean of Arts and Humanities at UC San Diego. Professor Lehrer, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here.
How does one study imagination?
You can study the imagination in many ways. Scientists, medical doctors, technologists like to imagine that they can study the imagination by studying the brain. And so, through digital imaging, through cognitive science, many scientists believe that they can find, if you like, the physical site of the imagination to see how the brain works when it's stimulated or imagining. I'm a professor of literature originally, and I'd like to believe that you can study the imagination by reading and studying the products of the human imagination. Works of poetry, novels, paintings, sculptures, dramatic performances, musical compositions. These are, to my mind, more the objects of the imagination than anything else. And what we're going to do at the Arthur C. Clarke Center, really for the first time anywhere, is bring together the scientific and the artistic study of the imagination to create an environment in which we can really see what the relationship is between the brain and the spirit.
Let's talk about some of these products you discussed. The British inventor said, one British inventor said that children should not immerse themselves in science fiction or books like Harry Potter because it closes them off from a world of science and discovery. Do you agree with that?
I would say exactly the opposite. Science and discovery have proceeded in the last 150 years because science fiction and fantasy writers have provoked scientists to do things that they themselves have imagined. And so the reading of science fiction, going back to Jules Verne if you like, has provoked change that technologists, scientists, and engineers have done. So my view is that the most exciting thing that a young person can read is fantasy and imagination. It doesn't close off the mind, it opens the mind.
And so why is space, why is science fiction such fertile ground for the imagination?
Science fiction is fertile ground for the imagination because it enables us to see ourselves in situations that we cannot have here on Earth. But these are situations that really talk about Earth. All science fiction is really about ourselves. Travel to the stars is really about life here at home. And if we think of the great classic science fiction television or movies, Star Wars and Star Trek, even though there are aliens with prosthetic noses and strange faces, nonetheless, these are all stories about getting along with people different from who we are. So the story of science fiction is always the story of ourselves, and it imagines us in new situations that help us change our own world for the better.
The goal of the Center for Human Imagination is to understand the process of imagination, but isn't the process different for each one of us in that we have different sources that inspire us?
We have different sources that inspire us, but at a fundamental level, we're all the same species. And the real heart of your question is this: how do we find ourselves as human beings, but also how do we understand ourselves as individuals? Human beings may be unique among species in that they conceive of themselves as individuals as well as members of groups. And so what the study of the imagination does is it brings us together as a species, as a society, as a global community, but also helps us understand what makes each one of us an individual who can appreciate that community in his or her unique way.
Very briefly, Arthur Clarke actually foretold the future with some of his writings. I think he wrote about telecommunication satellites 10 years before they actually became reality. What can the world learn from Arthur Clarke and imagination?
I think there are many things, but the briefest thing that I would say is this. Arthur Clarke taught us that regardless of how smart machines may be, they're not human. Artificial intelligence cannot be quantifiable. And if we created a HAL in this world from 2001, it may not simply help us, but it may hurt us. Machines have meaning in their relationships to human beings. Technology has meaning in relationship to arts and the spirit. And I think that is the lesson of Arthur C. Clarke.
And we will end it on that note. Professor Lehrer, thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you so much.